as a non-controlling minority shareholder, we do require certain rights to protect us against potential conflicts of interest with the majority shareholder. The first of these would be what we call tag-along rights. Now, for those of you that watched the video on the majority rights, drag-along right, this is sort of the exact opposite. The drag-along right was a protection for the majority shareholder to force the minority shareholder to participate in a transaction that he or she may not wanted to participate in. However, the flip side of that is what's called a tag-along right. A tag-along right, in our example where we own 30% of a business, the majority business owner owns 70% of a business, the majority business owner strikes a deal to sell his or her shares to a third-party acquirer at a certain valuation, certain terms, and we were not made a party to the original agreement to sell those shares. We can, quote unquote, tag along in that transaction and demand that our shares are sold to this third-party acquirer on the same terms and same valuation that the majority business owner is selling his or her shares. This is really a protection to us, the minority business owner, the minority shareholder, to where we're not in partnership with someone that we don't know and we don't trust. Another minority protection has to do with the company's issuance of a significant amount of debt. The majority business owner has to get our consent or approval to issue an extremely large amount of debt, significantly changing the risk profile of the company. Now, this is not to say that we won't agree with the majority business owner as to this being a prudent course of action. Maybe the company requires debt to grow. Maybe we are acquiring another company or something of that nature. But when a majority business owner is taking on a large amount of debt, significantly changing the risk profile of the business, we do require being a part of that conversation. Now, I will say that we will set a threshold at the beginning of a transaction as to what is deemed a material amount of debt. So we'll set a threshold when we buy a minority interest that anything above this threshold, the majority business owner has to ask us and get our approval to issue debt, and anything below that threshold, the majority business owner doesn't have to ask our approval. These would be things like a company credit card, things of that nature that really don't fundamentally change the risk profile of the business itself. The next minority protection has to do with the majority business owner's compensation as an employee of the business. Now, if you'll remember, the majority business owner has almost complete autonomy to run the business the way he or she would like, particularly regarding the employees of the business. They can hire and fire employees as they see fit. They can set their compensation levels accordingly. But when it comes to the majority business owner, let's say this majority business owner is president of the business, setting his or her own compensation and also being an owner of the business, there are potential conflicts of interest there that as a minority shareholder we have to have protections in place. If a majority business owner wants to give him or herself an increase of, say, 3% a year to keep up with inflation or to just give a cost of living adjustment, we're certainly fine with that. But when a business owner wants to double their salary or triple their salary, that presents an issue with really them as an employee receiving a vast majority of the company's proceeds in W-2 earnings versus distributed pro rata amongst the shareholders. So we do require a minority protection around setting the majority business owner's compensation, since they are both an employee and an owner of the business. Finally, we'll discuss what's called a put right, or a minority protection that gives a minority shareholder the ability to sell his or her shares back to the company itself at a set time and a set valuation. Now, we would never make an investment with the intent to exercise a put right, but as a non-controlling minority shareholder where we really don't have any affirmative rights, we really just have negative rights, we really have to have a mechanism to get liquidity if at some point in time in the future we just have a disagreement with the business owner. Now, we do structure these put rights where they're very palatable to the majority business owner and they have clear visibility as to how things would play out if they were ever exercised. They have that visibility on the front end when we make a minority ownership investment in the business. There are many ways to structure a put right, but the big provisions are when the put right is exercisable, what is the valuation, what are the payment terms. And we typically would structure a put right where it's only exercisable at the earliest of 5 years from closing. And the valuation of the put right, again, is structured to where we're disincentivized from exercising this put right, but where we do have clarity both from our standpoint and the majority business owner's standpoint as to how that valuation would play out if it were ever exercised. And again, to disincentivize us from exercising that put right, we would set the valuation based off a formula at the outset instead of bringing in external auditors and valuation experts at a particular time. We would rather have the valuation based on a formula than bringing in outside folks. And this formula would be really probably based on a whatever the trailing 12-month earnings of the business are at the time of exercise of the put right, and then we would assign a multiple to those earnings as to what the enterprise value or equity value of the business is at that particular time. We would negotiate this multiple on the earnings at the time of the original transaction to where, again, we're disincentivized from exercising this put right, but if we decided to, we have visibility as to what the valuation would be at that time. Now, assuming we do exercise our put right, how is the put right paid out? We're equity investors, we're not debt investors, so we don't want to create a contingent liability for the business owner who is probably very debt averse. We don't want to create, if we can help it, a situation where a business owner has to go lever up the balance sheet to pay us out. And so we really would give the business owner a couple of options as to how to pay us out. First and foremost, the business owner could say, you know what, I'm fine with us getting liquidity, we'll just sell the business. And in that case, we all just sell the business and we get our pro rata proceeds from the business. But if the business owner says, I don't want to sell the business, I want to pay you guys out via the put right valuation and methodology, then in that situation, we would more than likely structure a seller note to where we're paid out over a period of years with the cash flow that the company generates itself. The business owner can pay us out over a period of years, and then after that time, the business owner goes back to owning 100% of the business. The overarching theme with the put right is to make it very palatable to the business owner, but we do have to have some liquidity mechanism as a non-controlling minority shareholder.